Om Namah Shivaya, Asenest Fire, here on The Way of Dharma. Our topic today, I'm going to review a book, a very interesting book by Michael W. Ford. So, if you are new over here, please make sure that you do subscribe. Please do make sure that you do like this video. And if you have any questions, make sure that you hit the comment section. And I'll be sure to answer any of your questions that you have. Om Namah Shivaya, Asenest Fire. This is The Way of Dharma, a channel where we talk about mantras, we talk about yoga, we talk about spirituality, we talk about different magical systems, ranging from the Western esoteric system, the African form of spirituality, and lastly, Sanatana Dharma, the teachings of Hinduism and the Vedas. Om Namah Shivaya. So guys, in our topic for today, we are going to talk about a very interesting book by Michael W. Ford called Ahrimanic Yoga. So who is Michael W. Ford? Michael W. Ford is an occult practitioner who is promulgating or publicizing the practice of Luciferianism or Luciferian magic. So what is Luciferianism in a nutshell? Luciferianism is actually the teachings of Lucifer, which are largely dependent or largely based or has a foundation in the philosophical teachings of who's that guy? I think it's Charles Darwin? But anyway, the teachings, the fundamental teachings of Luciferianism are survival of the fittest, basically. So the Luciferians strive to be the best in every thing they can attain to, basically. So if it's in life, they strive to be the best through self-deification, which is what? Deifying themselves and seeing God in themselves and strengthening the characteristics of God within themselves, which are in actuality the teachings of each and every spiritual system. So Luciferianism is that, but it does so through the left-hand path. What is the left-hand path? The left-hand path is in actuality a school of thought or a way of life which is practicing magic, which is considered to be dark magic. There's what we call white magicians or white practitioners, and there's black magicians. So the latter falls into the Luciferian left-hand path. So Luciferianism is based on practicing black magic or what would be considered dark magic to actually deify ourselves and to actually become the best in whatever that we aspire to. So those are the Luciferians. So in the Western Hemisphere, the one who is popularizing such philosophies is in actuality Michael W. Ford. The root of Luciferianism, I can't quite remember where it has its foundations from, but it had started in the West. So Luciferianism started in the West, obviously, and then Michael W. Ford happened to be the one who is a practitioner of such works. There's very few Luciferian practitioners in the entire world, basically, because of the stigma of good and bad, and what they practice is what is considered to be bad, basically. So no one would want to see themselves practicing what is considered to be bad or black or dark magic. So Michael W. Ford is responsible for that, not in a bad way. So what do I think about the author? I think Michael W. Ford is a best author, one of the best authors, not because of what he writes or whatever or his way of thinking, One, because he provides so many books about Luciferianism and left-hand path magic. He just provides so much information out there about the left-hand path and Luciferianism. So that's what makes him the best author. He gives you information. There's plenty of books that he has wrote or authored. There's plenty. That's number two. So he gives us information in enormous quantities. Number three, in his books, the way he speaks with conviction, and those ideals can be used even out of Luciferianism because they strengthen you. Whatever he says strengthens you. In terms of the practicality of his knowledge or his philosophies on those books, I think they are impractical to a certain degree. Because if you can check, there's a book that he authored, The Bible of the Adversary. If you are a beginner, you can't relate to such books, you understand? Because you would read through it and then you find a tautology. You find him repeating some of the things that he wrote in the first chapters. And then you find that the tautology, he repeats what he says, and then it overwhelms and exhausts you, thereby making you to lose attention and interest in whatever he has written. So it gives you a hard time as a beginner to actually go around and understand and try to put into practice whatever he's saying. So in this particular book, Ahrimanic Yoga, Ahriman is in actuality the adversary from the Persian pantheon. The Persian pantheon, the story of Zurvan, Ahriman, and Omazda. So Ahriman is in actuality the adversary. So in Luciferianism, one of the most venerated or revered deity would be Ahriman. So in terms of Ahriman, he's an adversary. So he's an adversary, and Luciferianism has its core principles on adversarial workings. So what is an adversary? An adversary is someone who is against the other one. If you have an opponent, he is your adversary or she is your adversary. So Ahriman would be the adversary of Zurvan. So in Christianity, Satan would be the adversary of Jehovah or Yaldabaoth or Yahweh, basically. So Ahriman is in actuality an adversarial deity. So Luciferianism has its core principles in adversarial workings. So they do whatever that is adversarial to whatever that is actually being practiced. So point number one, with this path, you see that already they doing whatever that is against the other workings. You understand? So if you have an upward pointing star in Luciferianism, you would have a downward pointing star, 5-pointed downward star. So that would be the opposite of it. So instead of using the pentagram as it is, they would invert it and use it in such workings, saying that it gives out power into the cosmos and into the external world. Instead, invert it so that you can gain power from it. Those are the workings of the left-hand path and Luciferianism. So in terms of Ahrimanic Yoga, the book that I read is in actuality a book on yoga, but they've changed the terms and the symbols to those of Luciferianism. So what do I think of that? I think it's a very, very stupid way to actually perpetuate something. Why do I think so? I think Luciferianism in its entirety, or whatever that's being practiced publicly, is impractical and is stupid to a certain degree. Why do I think so? Because largely because of the fact that whatever that's being practiced in Luciferianism is in actuality a corruption of whatever spiritual system that would be corrupted at that time. So in Ahrimanic Yoga, you would find that they take knowledge of the Hindus, knowledge of the Vedas, knowledge of chakras, and knowledge of Tantra. They would take it and then they put some of the words in there, like Ahriman and Ahrimanic Yoga, to actually perpetuate their idea of Luciferianism. So when you check, in actuality, Luciferianism doesn't have any of its own practices. So it has practices from many different systems, like the Hindu Vedic culture. It also has the teachings from the Persian pantheon, and the teachings from Greek pantheon by the workings of Hecate, and also many other deities like Ereshkigal and Sumerian pantheon, because you would find spirits as such spirits as Lilith, and then you would find some other spirits from the Goetia like Aishma Deva or Asmodeus. So in that practice, it's actually a folly practice. It's a folly system. It doesn't have any practice of its own. It keeps on borrowing practices and spirituality from different traditions and school of thought. So in this book, Ahrimanic Yoga, it's an entire plagiarism of the Hindu teachings and the Indian Vedic culture, because when you find that it speaks about chakras, you see that the information is similar to a certain book on chakras. It's almost like Michael W. Ford actually took those words and cut them and paste them onto his book to actually publicize and perpetuate Luciferianism. So another thing about that book in particular, it's overpriced for what you find in there. Because what you find in there, basically, you would find in a Swami's book or in any teachings of Sanatana Dharma by any Swami, basically, at a much cheaper price, and you would actually get more information about those chakras, about those tantric workings in that book. Basically, you would have a large book that has information about Vedic culture and chakras and tantra, which in Mikhail's book is actually a small quantity of the teachings of Sanatana Dharma. So he plagiarized those writings, almost like he cut it out of some book and actually pasted it in his book Ahrimanic Yoga. What do I think of Ahrimanic Yoga? I don't think there's something like that. These are one of the things that used to upset me in 2021. There's a guy, Sutek Amun, from the West, basically. I know this guy through Travis Majors, and I used to follow this guy, and I do like some of his teachings on stone magic and crystals and gemstones, basically. So in another post, he had written that there's something that he practices, he would call necro yoga. Guys, if you don't understand now the teachings of yoga, what does yoga mean? Yoga means union. So you can't take Arhiman or necro and then put with yoga and form a few asanas out of your mind, a few body positions and mudras out of your mind and give to people to practice. What is that? The teachings of Sanatana Dharma and the teachings of yoga are not meant to be taken lightly. You understand? You can't take the teachings of yoga and corrupt them so that they can suit your needs, and then you then send them out to the public, because once you start to change a minor detail about a certain posture, it doesn't manipulate the energy or ignite or awaken the energy inside of your body the way it should have been. Because by doing that posture, you are in actuality manipulating energy to move in a certain way, to ignite and awaken a certain energy inside of you. So if you modify that posture, the energy doesn't move the same way anymore. So it is rendered useless. It doesn't work basically. So that's what I'm saying. So these guys that are taking things like yoga and then putting Ahriman in the front of it and then practicing it as Luciferians, it shows you that the path on its own doesn't have a foundation or a strong foundation basically. So that's one of the reasons why I actually didn't go further into Luciferianism and all that stuff. So in terms of this book, I'm disappointed. I think that it's overpriced, and I think that you can get more information out of books written by Swamis and Indian authors for that matter. And if you want to learn more about yoga, you should definitely go into the spiritual system of Sanatana Dharma. That's where you will find a huge vocabulary and a huge huge teachings or large chunks of information based on yoga, and you will learn definitely what they mean about what they mean when they talk about yoga. I'm sorry, I'm a bit pumped up. I'm not calm as I used to be, so I'm speaking fast, and some of the words I'm actually corrupting the in English language, but yeah, it's fine. This is what I wanted to say regarding that book. So let's move further into the ideology of spirituality and why I decided that I should continue with the teachings of Sanatana Dharma as opposed to the teachings of the modern day or the New Age movement, basically, which is in actuality most of the paths in the Western Hemisphere are in actuality New Age paths, basically. Luciferianism being one of them. Luciferianism doesn't have a strong foundation, like I said, as I said. So there's a time where you will practice Luciferian magic, and then you will almost hit a crossroad, and then you want to know what to do to move on further. This is when you actually do what? You will borrow from the practices of yoga and Sanatana Dharma. That's when you will start to meditate. That's when you will do the pranayama, the regulation of breath. But in a Luciferian ideology, you see how useless this path is in actuality. Because you will have a crossroad, and then you want to know what to do to get you to another level, to awaken some other states of consciousnesses that you have to attain to or to aspire to. Then you will do what? You will start to borrow from the teachings of the teachings of Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma. So, and then you follow the Luciferian ideology. So now you end up becoming a confused practitioner, because now you are borrowing from other traditions and pantheons, but you're saying and claiming that you are Luciferianism. And most of the workings are based on vampirism, which is in actuality sucking the energy of other people. I don't think it's a good path for I and I, or whoever who is truly a human being. I don't think vampirism would be good for that. Not in terms of morality and in terms of good and bad or duality. I think that Luciferianism, not Lucifer, I think vampirism is a dizzy path on its own, because to take something from someone would imply that you don't have any supply from yourself, basically. So now you have to constantly steal from other people. So now building a spiritual path based on that, I think you're stupid, my friend, because now you steal from people and then you don't learn to build for yourself the energy that you would be stealing from people which would be easy because in Luciferianism, they tell you that you must do Ahrimanic Yoga. Yoga automatically gives you energy, awakens the Shakti within you, which gives you spiritual energy. So now, but you are doing Ahrimanic Yoga and you are doing vampirism, you are stealing energy from other people, but at the same time, yoga is giving you energy. So now you are confused now. You are confused now. What are you actually practicing? So for human beings who get the infinite amount of prana, as other normal human beings would from the infinite potential, um, it's stupid to be a vampire basically if you are such a human. But in other cases, in rare occasions, you know that there's so many species that live amongst us. There's spiritual beings, ethereal beings, astral entities. Um, there's people who come on earth who come from different originations, like different extraterrestrial species who have such characteristics of lacking, like the reptilian people. Some of them, they don't have an energy of their own, so they have to steal. And then I can understand if it's being practiced by such a species. But in such cases, such species come here already and they are already evolved and advanced. So they can't take information on vampirism from Michael W. Ford's books and then utilize it to actually drain the life force of other human beings. Already to be a vampire, you'd have to have a way of surviving and sucking the life force of other different entities and physical beings basically. So you can't go back and read on vampirism to actually steal the energy of another being. So vampirism, and then you can use it to drain the life force of another person. Suppose you want to drain another person's life force and utilize the energy to do a ritual. So which means you would be going about every time stealing life force and energy from people to actually use in your workings. It shows that you are inadequate, you are not adept to start with because you don't have an energy of your own. You have to be constantly stealing from other people to actually advance yourself. So what do I have to say about you? I think you are stupid. So yes, this is what I wanted to say, guys. Such paths have no strong foundation, and you reach a certain point in that path and then you don't know what you have to do afterwards because one, such paths are publicized by people like Michael W. Ford. It's not an ancient system which has years of practice to actually make it a system of its own, a tradition of its own. You have to constantly borrow things from other cultures and other traditions, which for me, it's useless. Let's take Hinduism for example. Hinduism has a vocabulary for even the most abstract spiritual concepts. There's in actuality a language which is far greater than Sanskrit and Hinduism and Hindi basically, which is called Sandhya. Sandhya means in between, or the breaking of dawn and the breaking of night basically. So it's an actuality Sandhya, or the breaking of the day and night. So it's Sandhya. It symbolizes the Sushumna, which is a nadi inside of you, inside of your spine, which in actuality transports spiritual energy up to your crown basically. So Sandhya is the middle path, is the link between spirituality and physical life. So that that on its own shows the the way in which ancient spiritual systems are so advanced. You understand? Because they have a vocabulary even for the most abstract concepts. So if you have a spiritual system like Luciferianism, I don't see where you are going. Practicing Ahrimanic Yoga, I don't see where you are going, because the things that are in his books come from Hinduism. And simply by reading his book, that one book, you don't have sadhana that could last you for a lifetime. You understand? You don't have sadhana that could last you for a lifetime. You can't meditate on that because it doesn't tell you about Raja Yoga. You can't do bhakti on the Luciferian deities because it doesn't teach you about bhakti yoga. And the entities in Luciferianism, I don't think they can clean karma. I don't think they can help you find enlightenment in any way. Instead, you will find yourself acting like the EA Coatings and some of those notorious nefarious black magicians. So this is what I'm trying to say in actuality. Because now 1 minute you are practicing with Ereshki Gal, and then the other you are with Hekati, and the other you are with Bilael, and the other you are with Ariman. Those deities come from different spiritual systems. So basically, when you practice such spiritual system, you are dabbling and moving around in different spiritual systems. So for me, Ahrimanic Yoga, it's useless. Luciferianism, it's useless. The left-hand path from the Western Hemisphere, it's useless. Do you know why? Because it doesn't have a strong foundation. It doesn't have a history of magical practice, which could stretch far back into 5,000 years at least, or even 10,000 years. It doesn't even have 1,000 years in its practice, basically. So you will reach a point whereby you don't know what you need to do to jump over. So which is what our spiritual teachers are failing us at. When you look at the likes of Brother Panic and Bobby Hammett, I'm not criticizing anyone, guys, but all I'm saying is that these people keep on reading and reading and reading, but in terms of practice, you have a small scale of practice. You have only spells on attracting money, you have spells on attracting love, you have spells on attacking the enemy, but you can't have any rituals that would subjugate any any personality traits that you wouldn't like to have in you. Basically, you don't have any ways to clear your karma. If you use any Western esoteric system, you don't have any ways to meditate, to help you meditate, to actually balance the two sides of the brain, the two hemispheres of the brain. So you can't do anything without borrowing from the Hinduism culture. So you are taking from every system and you are dabbling, and you don't follow any path, and then you don't attain to a certain level of practice and spirituality, because 1 minute you are practicing lucid dreaming, the other minute you are practicing Luciferianism, the other minute you are trying out astral travel, the other minute you are ancestral worshipping and all that stuff. It's good to study many different systems to get knowledge, but in terms of practice and what you can follow for a lifetime, you have to find a system which can last you a lifetime, basically, which can help you to subjugate those traits. Or you can do that, have spells of attracting love and following those systems, but in terms of going forward and erasing some of their personality traits, meditation would be the best. So you see, in every aspect that we speak of, it always takes you back to the path of Sanatana Dharma. So why not follow Sanatana Dharma? Not follow in terms of worshipping, in terms of venerating. The mindset from Luciferianism and the Western esoteric systems would be wonderful if you were to take it like the mindset of chaos magic. If you were to take it into practicing Hinduism and Tantra, you would have you would have great results, because you wouldn't go with the mindset of fear and fear mongering, and you wouldn't have any restrictions in your mind. So that's what would make you a competent practitioner in those affairs. So using that mindset, it's a prop. It's a yes. But using that system, I don't think you can go anywhere, because it's constantly borrowing from other traditions. So these are my thoughts on Ahrimanic Yoga. These are my thoughts on Western left hand path esoteric systems. So if you want to learn more about spirituality, if you want to learn even the most abstract spiritual concepts, come into Sanatana Dharma. There's a prediction that was once said by who's that guy? Nostradamus. He once said that when everyone is in despair, or when everyone is lost, Hinduism will be there to save the entire nation. And I'm not saying this to sound like I'm a fanatic, or to sound like a hypocritical person, or to try and sound like somebody who's recruiting you into Hinduism. I'm not recruiting you into Hinduism purely because I want you to do the namastes, or to be a light practitioner in such spiritual traditions. I'm not doing that. There's enormous quantities of teachings, and there's a rich spiritual vocabulary in Hinduism, and there's a strong foundational practice of occultism in Hinduism that is accessible to us publicly. So to have such an advantageous path, it's an advantage basically. So I'm following that path in that regard basically. I'm not saying that you should follow the Indian culture. I'm not saying that you need to start to change your diet and eat like the Indian. You are in the city, you are in an urbanized area. You can't follow some of the diets of the Indian. You can't learn to speak Hindi purely because you are practicing the teachings of Sanatana Dharma, or you are doing that. You can't start following Krishna and being a fanatic of Krishna like some of the lost Hindus that do so. All I'm saying is that check out this spiritual path. There's a strong spiritual vocabulary, and there's jewels in those teachings that can help you in your spiritual journey. There's abstract concepts which can be described to you through Hinduism, through Sanskrit, or Sanatana Dharma. This is what I'm saying. The New Age movement is in actuality affecting each and every one of us. In Western esoteric spheres, you find people who are addicted to speaking those things about positivity, love and light, peace, love and light. They even change words like good morning. They say grand rising, because now morning sounds like mourning when you mourn for a dead person. So now they don't want that sound, because that sound entrances you and it casts a spell onto you, because they sound the same as morning, so you don't use that. And then they burn incense, they claim to use crystals and gemstones, but they also go out to eat shrooms and drink alcohol. So there's nothing essentially that they do. Also, when you go into the East, Hinduism, there's such practitioners too who want to follow the deities like someone who is here to save you. They are fanatics. A low-level, corrupted form of bhakti would be what they are practicing. Jai Shri Ram, you see that thing that they do, following such things and following such ideals and trying to appear as if they are holy and clean basically. So this is what they do. It's a corrupted form of bhakti. Bhakti is one of the hardest ways, or one of the hardest yogas. So you can't do bhakti because it's one of the hardest. It needs you to be passionate about your deity. You are externalizing the deity so that you can attain to union to yoga through that passion that you are building for deity. Meaning there's a surrender of self, which is the false identity. It dies along the way, and then you are merging with deity, with your true self. So it's not just anybody who can do that. So bhakti, in terms of the new age movement, you find people criticizing you for tantra, then you know that even in Hinduism these people are claiming to be white hand or right hand practitioners. And then what's funny is this point: when you do puja for result, or yes, even if you still want to get spiritual results, it's a result. So whatever that you do for getting results, it's a tantra basically. So, and also the practices that you see in right hand practice, they are also seen in the left hand practice. So it's tantra. You are doing tantra, but you are calling it white tantra. So now you are fooling yourself. You see the new age mindset, it's even in Hinduism. So the new age mindset is everywhere. And the paths which you see in the Western esoteric system, they are new age movement concepts. You join those orders, there's a certain degree that they can't pass, and now you have to leave them. Some of these orders, they restrict you from practicing whatever that's not being taught in the order. Like in Lon Milo Duquette's early years, he couldn't practice evocation and evoking the goetic spirits because now he was restricted from what he was practicing in his order basically. So he was constantly being criticized for that, you understand. So these paths, they have where they stop, and to go over into the next level you need a strong foundational practice, a strong foundational spiritual system that dates back years and years ago. In terms of Egyptian mystery system and esoteric system, most of the documents, they are in Europe basically, in the Vatican, in the British Museum. There's manuscripts, and there's also scrolls in Egypt basically, which are inaccessible to the public. So even the simple practices of chanting for the Egyptian gods and goddesses, they are not accessible to the public, so you don't know what to do. So also on its own, that path has a point whereby you can't go further into it because of the lack of information. But you go further into the East, India, guys, you can get a sadhana that can last you a lifetime, because there's a rich vocabulary, rich spiritual history, because it's still intact and it's being released into the internet. So if you are a wise person, you could check it out, or you can mix it out until finally you can see for yourself what I'm talking about. Om Namah Shivaya, Asanist Fire. If you want to contact me for readings and consultations, please make sure that you do check me out on the email asinist.fya@gmail.com. It's asinist.fire@gmail.com. You can also link me up in the comment section. I'll be able to reply to your comments. And also, what else? I'll also link my email in the description below. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure that you do subscribe. Please make sure that you do like Om Namah Shivaya. And I wish peace for each and every one of you. Om Namah Shivaya.